Good morning, everybody. I'm Pastor Chris, and it's great to be giving you the message today. And, we come to the week after Easter, and things change. Like, we're done with Lent. We had this long time of Lent and the exciting. We're done with the palms, the waving of palms, the excitement of that. We got through the Maundy, Thursday, the Good Friday, the explosions of Easter and the excitement, all of that, and then we get to the week after, and it's kind of ordinary, right? Did you know that in the church calendar, going back, long time, there's certain times that are baked into the calendar called ordinary times. We have a time of Easter for a bunch of weeks after Easter. And then we get into this place called ordinary. And total transparency, I think it's a terrible name. But anyway, we're so used to things just having more pizzazz to it, right? In our culture, we make things exciting, even if it's not exciting. And ordinary is just, exactly the name. It's ordinary, right? So I sat with that word for a lot this week. And maybe you can relate to this, but I think in our lives, and especially in my life, I always struggled between wanting to be ordinary and being fine with that and blending into everything, but also wanting to be more than ordinary. So kind of going back and forth between those two. Just like that. And maybe you connect with that. And, years ago when I was in college, I did a bunch of years. I did 2 years at Brookdale Community College, as a lot of people do around here. And you see, I loved to blend in at that time. I'd like to be ordinary. I like to go below the radar. It was nice if nobody noticed me. Silence was better. No conflict was better. So I didn't want to deal with any of that. So ordinary was really good for me. However, I found that as I was finishing up Brookdale and I was moving on to a 4-year college, which was Rowan University, right? And I was moving on to that time of my life, that ordinary wasn't like what I wanted anymore. I wanted something more than that, and I struggled with that. And I actually did some research. And I'm a millennial. I don't know if any of you are millennials, but I'm a millennial. We were very looked down upon for a long time, and then new generation came and everybody shifted to them. So I'm also considered a geriatric millennial. So I'm an older millennial. That's a real word, a geriatric millennial, which I don't love the title, again. However, the thing is about that is geriatric millennials knew what things were like before technology, and then they did things after technology. So makes us good at preaching, apparently. We could fit with any kind of culture. But here's the thing. Millennials very, very much fear being ordinary. That's a thing of millennials. And you know what our generation created? Taking videos of yourself doing stupid things. We created that. Thank you very much. Right? So here it was, wanting to be more than ordinary and going off to a 4-year college. And I had a little bit of a problem because everybody already had friends. Everybody had their circles, their things that they did. And I'm starting as a junior, and everybody's on their 3rd year already. This is a problem. So I devised a plan. And so the plan was, I like sports, so I said, I'm going to join every single intramural sport that they have, which was 11 at the time. I joined all of them. I still did some schoolwork, but I joined all of them. I did ping pong. I played wiffle ball. I played, there's a game called volleyball. It's volleyball inside a racquetball court. And I played regular volleyball, soccer, street hockey. I did all of them. The fear was, if I don't meet people, if I just kind of stay to myself, would I be more than ordinary, right? That was the fear. And then it went as far as I actually went and I joined the rugby club, which there was only 8 guys at the time. They didn't have a rugby club. We were trying to start it. And then it got disbanded when we realized that nobody knew how to play rugby, and 5 out of the 8 broke their nose. So it was just like kill the man with the ball. It didn't look like rugby. But the fear was that being ordinary was not enough. Not enough. Today, our message, I'm going to focus on a guy in the Old Testament, and his name is Joshua. And Joshua is the definition of ordinary. Joshua has to come right after Moses. And take a look at some of the things that Moses did, right? Moses is that great Moses, right? He parted the Red Sea, right? He got all the Israelites out of slavery. He established laws that they still look to, right? He created a leadership that they worked through. He even hit a rock and got water out of it. Like, imagine having to go after that guy, right? And so he had to do all of that. And even when you look at the books of the Bible, right? If I tell you to give me the books of the Bible, most of you can give me the first 5. You say Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And I was like, what's the next one? It's Joshua, right? Most people get the first 5 and then they get stuck at 6, right? It's the definition of ordinary. Joshua is very much under the radar, always kind of missed, right? And for Moses was able to go up to the promised land. He was not allowed into the promised land. And it was Joshua who's going to take the reins and bring the Israelites into the promised land. And in order to do that, they have to go through the Jordan River, and then they're going to tackle the first city, which is the city of Jericho. That is our focus today, the city of Jericho. And they go, and God gives them a battle plan. And it is one of the most obscure battle plans. Like, if you're studying battle plans and things like that, like, this is definitely not something that you would study at West Point. But it says God, this is a God plan all over it. And here's the thing about Joshua, right? If I was to define Joshua, I would define it by this, okay? When they trust God, things go well. In the whole book of Joshua, every time they trust God, even if God has some weird plans and things for them, it just goes well. But then, when things kind of go like to where they get bored, or they think they know best, or they just try to do it on their own, right? And they do it their own way, it starts to go sideways, right? And that is the definition of things that happen in the book of Joshua. God is asking the Israelites, just trust me. Just trust me. So our passage today comes from Joshua 6, and I'll start with 1 through 5. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out, and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in." Israelites were told that the promised land is yours. It's all yours. I'm giving you the promised land. And what they're quickly finding is that promised land doesn't mean it's a place without conflict. There's still going to be conflict there, right? They're not just going to give it to you, but you have to trust God. The wall was said to be that no one can get in and no one can get out, right? But here's the interesting thing. God said, "I have delivered Jericho into your hands." Like, almost like completion language. Like, it's already done. I've delivered it. It's delivered. They haven't gone into battle yet. Nothing. He said, it's yours. Just trust me, right? The first time I ever looked at this battle plan, right, I laughed. I still look at it. I think it's kind of ridiculous, right? It's not a battle plan that they used back then often. It's not one you're going to see now. Not anybody that wants to win a battle, right? And so let's take a look at some of these things. March around 6 days silently. Just silently, right? Then have the 7 priests carrying trumpets 7 times, right? This is a whole week that they're doing this. Then blow your horns. Then just start yelling. And the walls will come down. I don't know about you, but this is scary, right? This is scary. But God is just saying, trust me. Just trust me. So let's go further. This is what happens. Verse 6. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army, advance, march around the city with all the armed guards going ahead of the ark of the Lord. When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. At this time, the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the army, do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to the camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. Could you imagine being the people on the inside of the building? Like, what are they doing out there? Like, they're just marching. They're not saying anything. Like, what's going on out there? And here these people are just trusting that something's going to happen, right? On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. Except on that day, they circled the city 7 times. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the... Oh, that's not the one I want. So let me read this one. And then the last one. When the trumpet sounded, the people shouted. And at the sound of the trumpet, when the people gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So every man charged straight in, and they took the city. So let me give you a modern interpretation of this. I wanted to see what would it look like today, right? And so I did a modern turn. So send in the armed men with their guns, right? And have them just kind of circle around the battlefield for 6 days, right? Now, you could have the guns, but you can't use them. And don't say anything. Just kind of circle around, okay? Then I want you to send in the chaplains, right? Send in the chaplains with musical instruments right onto the battlefield. Have them walk around a bunch, right? Then have the chaplains start playing the musical instruments. And then everybody just start shouting, and you'll win. You'll win the battle. Could you imagine being part of this army and saying, all right, I got this. We're gonna get through this. Like, we'll be safe. We'll be safe. Could you be this patient? Could you trust God in this situation when you're in a danger territory here, not saying anything, putting yourself out there, right? I imagine at some point that you would start feeling that this walking is redundant and pointless. I believe that we can connect with that on a large scale in our lives. That some points of our lives that we're walking and walking and walking, and it kind of feels redundant and pointless. Like, why are we still doing this? Where is this getting? Is this giving me any meaning or any purpose to my life? Why do I keep doing this? I sit with people often that try to understand the purpose that they have in this life, and they're struggling to understand what that purpose even means. And sometimes we are on top of the world with our faith, kind of like last week, right? On top of the world. But then sometimes we go back and we're just in this place of ordinary, where we're kind of just walking. And we're kind of saying, well, what's the point? And sometimes we're just like, where is the extraordinary? Where is the big stuff? At some point in that process, you then take control for yourself. That's when we always take control for ourselves. See, the Israelites, they prepared for this moment of battle. They practiced climbing, they practiced, fighting, they practiced all those things. They were going to take down Jericho, but God said, don't use any of that. Just keep walking and trust me. Just trust me. Keep walking. In our lives, we are so quick to act and take over. We love to do that. We have to be in control. And if things don't go the way we expected or hoped, we just get a new plan. Let's create a new plan real quick. Let's go. New plan. However, what we find with God is that He's asking for us to have patience. It did not take me long when I moved back to New Jersey to remember that you can't wait at a green light for more than 2 seconds. You know what that is? Someone trying to take control of the situation. We got to keep moving. There's not enough time. I got to get to the next place. Usually they get to the next place and then sit on their phones. But anyway, who's looking at that, right? We are not patient. We're not patient with each other. And we expect God to do extraordinary things each day. But if it doesn't go the way we want, we take over. We honk the horn. You see, if that doesn't happen, we're just like the Israelites, who, if you see later on and if you read later on in Joshua, they get impatient and they start doing things on their own, and it starts going sideways because they stop trusting God to do it. See, if I were in Joshua's army, I don't know how well I would be at silently circling a city. It would be hard for me. I grew up in New Jersey. But God's just asking them to just keep walking and keep walking. A week's a long time. The belief in our culture is this: extraordinary can only happen if I do it myself. If I do it myself, then it will be extraordinary, but I can't trust God to do that. I can't. But just like the Israelites, God is asking us to trust Him. Because if we trust Him, that's where the awesome things will happen. And maybe you're a parent, and your days kind of feel like that monotonous walking around, right? You wake up, you make breakfast, you get the kids to school, you pick them up, you go to practices, you dodge the kids' meltdowns as best you can, right? You do homework, you pack lunches, you do the bedtime, you hope to watch a show, but you probably fall asleep during that, and then you repeat the next day over and over and over again. It's like you're circling the walls of Jericho. Maybe you're at work and you do the same things every day, and you feel like it seems monotonous, and you wake up and then you hope that the conflict from the day before resolves itself and it just kind of disappears, and each day you hope that the next conflict just does the same thing, and you hope that some point that this job will give you purpose, or that some new job just falls in your lap, right? And you keep cycling and circling those walls until you hopefully retire. or maybe you retired, right? And you used to have life that had meaning of a job, or you thought it did back then, or you kind of make kind of like this vision that it used to give you purpose. And you maybe you're no longer have kids that are younger who need you, and you're retired, and your days now seem routine, like you're walking around, and time flies, and you're busy, and you don't even know how you're busy because you're retired, but you're busier than when you were even working, and it's like we're just marching around and around and around, and it's not giving us much meaning. Where is the extraordinary in our lives? We keep hoping for it, but it all just seems pretty ordinary, doesn't it? Or even here in your church life. You wake up, you go to church, wanting to go deeper, wanting things to grow inside of you, but they don't. Then you come the Sunday after Easter and the associate pastor's preaching, and things keep seeming like you're circling the walls of Jericho. Why am I doing all of this? You see, trusting in Jesus looks a lot like this. Going into prayer, learning to breathe and lower your own anxiety, getting your anxiety levels down, going to Scripture to do the same thing, going to that trusted friend to talk through the things, the conflict, the things that are boiling up inside you. And you ask, where is Jesus in this hard place that I find myself? Trusting God looks a lot like that. You know, I had a professor in seminary, and he spoke of this passage, and he quotes Oswald Chambers, who said this: "We think we have been called to do exceptional things with our lives, but we have not. We have been called to do ordinary things in exceptional ways." We have been called to do ordinary things in exceptional ways. The things I described were, I bet you some of you connected with some of those things. Those are ordinary things. But we're called to do ordinary things in exceptional ways. You know, Jesus used a lot of ordinary things, and he did exceptional things with them. He took ordinary mud and he put it on a guy's face, and then he started to see because he was blind. He took an ordinary basin of water and he washed the disciples' feet to show them what it was like to serve people. He took ordinary water and made it into wine. Jesus was always taking the ordinary and doing something exceptional with it. You know, even if you think about it this way, all right, when we look at the Gospels, right, the stories of Jesus, we're usually looking at 3 years that he was traveling with the disciples. But if you put all of the stories together in the Gospels, it doesn't even add up to a year. So what that means is that there's a whole lot of days that the Gospel writers didn't feel like anything significant happened worth them writing in. But there was something exceptional going on, wasn't there? But the majority of the days actually were kind of ordinary, which is pretty crazy. We spend most of our life walking around the walls just hoping for something to happen, marching and waiting and waiting. But maybe it's in the walking that something extraordinary is starting to happen. When I was in Pittsburgh, one of the churches I served at, I was a youth pastor, and it was right next to the high school in town. And one day I was in my office, and I started hearing helicopters. And then I started hearing tons of sirens. And then I started getting text messages from high schoolers that I had in the school. I ran the FCA in the school there, so I was in the school all the time. And I'm getting all these text messages, and what had happened is that a student brought 2 knives into school. And what he did was they basically said he had a mental break, and he was injuring kids in the school. And this made it onto CNN, to Fox, because it was the first time anything like this happened where it was a mass and it was not a gun. And one of the kids in my FCA, it was a girl, she was freshman. She was an ordinary freshman girl, and she was walking with two boys, and her books dropped, and she went to pick them up, and she heard like a swipe over her head, and the two boys on either side of her got injured. The girl, this freshman girl, had to make a decision of which boy to save. And so she chose one, and she dragged him into the classroom right next to her. Total God thing. In her ordinary health class the day before, they were teaching, what do you do with a stab wound? She saved the boy's life. And none of the kids or adults who got injured died. It was actually unbelievable. Some came close, but all were okay. An ordinary freshman girl in an ordinary town on an ordinary day, an ordinary health class, and something extraordinary happened. There is extraordinary in the ordinary. Paul said these words in 2 Corinthians. For God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, made his light shine in our hearts, to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair. You see, in the Bible, a jar of clay is a sign of ordinary and something that is very fragile. Jars of clay are easily broken, they're easily found, you see them everywhere, right? And we are the jars of clay. Easily found, very ordinary, easily broken. That's us. We're the jars of clay. With Jesus in us, though, we are just much more than just ordinary. We are much more than ordinary. Our lives may look ordinary, but like a jar of clay, they may feel ordinary, but we put our hope and all of our power in Jesus, and we are much more than just a jar of clay. They are more than ordinary. They are extraordinary because Jesus is in it. Do you trust? Do you trust in that? That you could be more than just ordinary. You could look ordinary, but in Jesus, you are much more than ordinary.